My name is Walter, and at 68, I thought I'd earned the right to a little respect from my family. After 4 decades as a mechanical engineer, raising 3 children as a single father after my wife passed, and building what I considered a comfortable life, I expected my adult children to value my experience. Instead, I got lectures about how outdated my thinking had become. It started innocently enough. My youngest son, Trevor, had just graduated from business school with his MBA. Fresh-faced at 26, full of modern theories, and convinced that anyone over 50 was technologically obsolete. During family dinners, he'd roll his eyes whenever I shared stories from my engineering days or offered advice about managing money or career decisions. "Dad, that's not how business works anymore," became his favorite phrase. "Your generation doesn't get it. Everything's digital now. Everything's disrupted. Your old-school methods are holding you back." My daughter, Patricia, wasn't much better. At 29, she worked in marketing and constantly reminded me that my analog mindset was keeping me from understanding the modern world. When I mentioned that I preferred writing checks and keeping paper records, she actually laughed. "Dad, you need to join the 21st century. Online banking, cryptocurrency, social media marketing, that's where real wealth is built now. Your way of doing things is so outdated." Even my oldest, Michael, who at 32 should have known better, started treating me like I was losing my mental faculties. When I'd offer advice about his struggling restaurant, he'd pat my shoulder condescendingly and say, "Thanks, Dad, but the food industry has changed since your day." The breaking point came during Trevor's birthday dinner at a trendy downtown restaurant. I'd suggested we go to Giuseppe's, the family-owned Italian place where I'd been taking the kids since they were small. Trevor actually groaned. "Dad, Giuseppe's is ancient history. Nobody cares about family, recipes, and traditional service anymore. It's all about the experience economy, Instagram-worthy presentations, fusion concepts. Giuseppe's is exactly the kind of outdated business model that's dying out." Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Trevor's right. Successful restaurants now are built on social media buzz and innovative concepts. Old-fashioned places like Giuseppe's just can't compete." I watched Giuseppe Rossini, the owner's son who'd taken over the restaurant, serving tables with the same pride his father had shown for 30 years. Giuseppe was probably my age, maybe a bit younger, but Trevor dismissed him as irrelevant as easily as he dismissed me. "You kids think everything old is worthless," I said quietly. "But sometimes experience and relationships matter more than the latest trends." Trevor actually laughed, not a kind laugh, but the sort of sound you make when someone says something particularly foolish. "Dad, with all due respect, your generation had it easy. Buy a house for 30,000, work one job your whole life, retire with a pension. That world doesn't exist anymore. We have to be smarter, faster, more adaptable. We can't rely on handshake deals and loyalty like you did. Your father built a good life through hard work and smart decisions," my eldest Michael said, but even his defense sounded half-hearted. "I'm not saying Dad didn't work hard," Trevor continued, warming to his theme. "But let's be honest, he got lucky with timing. Real estate appreciated, pensions were guaranteed, jobs were stable. Today's economy requires completely different strategies. Digital disruption, artificial intelligence, global markets. Dad's local, relationship-based approach just doesn't scale." Patricia leaned forward, her marketing background making her want to drive the point home. "Plus, Dad, you're not exactly embracing innovation. You still write checks, you refuse to use online banking, you don't even have a smartphone. How can you understand modern wealth building when you won't engage with modern tools?" I looked around the table at my 3 children, all so confident in their dismissal of everything I represented. They saw an old man clinging to outdated methods, too stubborn to adapt to their superior modern world. They had no idea what they were talking about, but explaining wouldn't help. They were convinced they knew better. "You're probably right," I said, raising my hands in surrender. "I'm just an old-fashioned guy with outdated ideas." Trevor smiled, thinking he'd won. "Dad, it's not your fault. Technology moves fast, but you should consider modernizing your approach. Maybe let Patricia help you set up online banking, or I could show you some investment apps that could really grow your savings. The irony was rich, but I kept my expression neutral. I appreciate the offer, maybe someday. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Patricia mentioned that she and her husband were looking at houses. The market is crazy competitive right now. We need to offer above asking price just to be considered, and even then, cash offers are winning. Have you talked to a good real estate agent? I asked. Trevor jumped in before Patricia could answer. Dad, real estate agents are basically obsolete now. Everything's online Zillow, Realtor.com, virtual tour. Patricia can research properties, comp values, market trends all from her laptop. The traditional agent model is being disrupted just like everything else. Plus, Patricia added, we're looking at newer developments. Modern construction, smart home features, contemporary layouts, not like those old houses you used to. I nodded, saying nothing about my real estate portfolio. They'd find out soon enough. The next few months followed the same pattern. Family gatherings became lectures about my outdated thinking. When I mentioned reading the newspaper over coffee each morning, Trevor talked about news aggregation algorithms and real-time information streams. When I said I preferred calling businesses instead of searching online, Patricia explained search engine optimization and digital marketing funnels. They meant well, I suppose. In their minds, they were helping their poor, confused father navigate a world that had left him behind. They genuinely believed I was struggling to keep up with modern life. The truth was far more complicated. You see, while my children were busy explaining the modern world to me, I was quietly managing a portfolio they couldn't imagine. Those outdated relationships they marked. They'd been the foundation of 40 years of strategic investments and business partnerships. Let me back up and explain how this all started. When I graduated with my engineering degree in 1978, I did what most young men did. I got a job, worked hard, and started building a life. But unlike many of my peers, I paid attention to the older engineers, the men who'd been in the industry for decades. I listened when they talked about investments, property development, and business opportunities. My mentor, Frank Morrison, was a 55-year-old engineer who'd been working industrial projects since the 1950s. Frank taught me something that business schools don't cover. Relationships are the real currency of wealth building. Walter, he told me during one of our coffee breaks, you can chase the latest investment trends, or you can build relationships with people who create those trends. I'd rather know the developer before he builds the shopping center than try to guess which retail stock might benefit. Frank introduced me to his network contractors, developers, city planners, zoning lawyers, and other engineers. Not through LinkedIn or digital networking events, but over dinner at Giuseppe's, during weekend fishing trips, and at the local Rotary Club meetings. By 1985, I'd saved enough from my engineering salary to make my first real estate investment. But instead of buying a house to flip or a rental property in a trendy neighborhood, I partnered with Tom McKenna, a developer I'd met through Frank. Tom was planning a small office complex on the outskirts of town, in an area most people considered too far from downtown to be valuable. The city's growing this direction, Tom explained over coffee at Giuseppe's. I've seen the infrastructure plans. In 10 years, this'll be prime commercial real estate. I invested 15,000, a huge sum for me at the time, to become a limited partner in Tom's development. My children think I just worked my engineering job and saved money conservatively. They have no idea I was building a real estate portfolio before they were born. That first investment paid off beautifully. Within 5 years, the area developed exactly as Tom predicted. The office complex was fully leased, property values had tripled, and I'd earned back my initial investment plus enough profit to make 3 more deals with Tom. But real estate was just the beginning. Through my engineering work, I met manufacturers, factory owners, and industrial developers. When you design systems for companies, you learn about their business challenges, their growth plans, and their financial situations. Sometimes you learn about opportunities that never make it to public investment markets. In 1992, I was consulting on a waste management facility for a company called Industrial Processing Solutions. The owner, Carl Hudson, mentioned over lunch that he was looking for silent partners to expand into recycling operations. Environmental regulations are getting stricter, Carl explained. Companies are going to need specialized recycling services, but most waste management firms are too bureaucratic to adapt quickly. I want to build a smaller, more flexible operation. I invested $25,000 in Carl's recycling expansion. Within 3 years, his company was processing waste for half the manufacturing plants in the region. When a larger waste management corporation bought him out in 1998, my investment had grown to $180,000. The pattern repeated throughout the 1990s and 2000s. Through my engineering consulting, I met business owners, developers, and entrepreneurs. I built relationships, learned about opportunities, and made strategic investments. Not flashy tech stocks or trendy mutual funds, but solid, profitable businesses run by people I knew and trusted. When my wife, Margaret, was diagnosed with cancer in 2003, I had the financial flexibility to take time off work, pay for the best treatments, and focus on her care. The passive income from my investments covered our living expenses while I concentrated on what mattered most. After Margaret passed in 2005, I threw myself back into work and investing. My children, dealing with their own grief, assumed I was just staying busy with my job. They didn't know I was expanding my business relationships and growing my portfolio. By 2010, I owned interests in 2 commercial real estate developments, 3 small manufacturing companies, and a logistics firm that specialized in industrial transportation. My outdated approach had built substantial wealth, but I lived modestly and never talked about money with my children. When I retired from my engineering job in 2015, my kids assumed I was living on my pension and Social Security, maybe with some modest savings. They had no idea that my retirement was actually a transition to managing my investments full-time. Giuseppe's restaurant, which Trevor had dismissed as an outdated business model, was one of my most successful investments. I'd been eating there for 20 years, watching Giuseppe SR build a loyal customer base through consistent quality and personal service. When Giuseppe Jr. wanted to expand but couldn't get conventional financing, I provided a private loan at favorable terms. The restaurant had been profitable every year since, and my loan payments covered a significant portion of my living expenses. But here's what my children really didn't understand. While they were chasing digital disruption and modern investment strategies, I was building relationships with the people who actually controlled wealth in our community. Tom McKenna, my first development partner, had become one of the region's most successful commercial developers. Carl Hudson's recycling company had grown into a regional environmental services firm. The manufacturing companies I'd invested in had expanded, been sold, or spun off profitable subsidiaries. My outdated approach had connected me with what economists call private market, investments opportunities that never appear on stock exchanges or investment apps, deals that are only available through personal relationships and industry connections. When Trevor talked about digital disruption and artificial intelligence, he wasn't wrong about technology's importance. But he missed the fundamental truth that all business is ultimately about relationships between people. You can optimize algorithms and automate processes, but someone still has to decide what to build, where to build it, and how to finance it. The irony reached its peak in early 2023 when Patricia mentioned during Sunday dinner that she and her husband were struggling to buy a house. "The market is insane," she complained. "We found a perfect house in Westfield Meadows, but 3 other couples are bidding. The seller wants all cash, no inspection period, closing in 2 weeks. We can't compete with that." Westfield Meadows was a development I'd invested in 12 years earlier. Tom McKenna had shown me the plans over dinner at Giuseppe's in 2011, explaining his vision for upscale family housing on former farmland. "It's perfectly positioned," Tom had said. "Good schools, highway access, but still feels suburban and safe. Young families will pay premium prices for this combination." It invested $200,000 in Tom's Westfield Meadows project. As a limited partner, I received quarterly reports on sales, market values, and development progress. Patricia's perfect house was in a neighborhood I'd helped finance, sold at prices that generated returns on my original investment. But I said nothing, just nodded sympathetically and suggested they keep looking. Trevor's situation was even more ironic. His MBA had landed him a job at a corporate consulting firm where he analyzed business strategies and market trends for mid-sized companies. He was smart, analytical, and full of modern business theories. What Trevor didn't know was that two of his firm's clients were companies I had significant investments in. When he came home excited about innovative industrial logistics solutions and environmentally sustainable manufacturing processes, he was describing businesses I'd helped finance 15 years earlier. The final straw came in June 2023, when all three of my children approached me with what they clearly thought was a generous offer. We were having dinner at Michael's house. He'd finally learned to cook, though his restaurant was still struggling when Patricia cleared her throat nervously. "Dad, we've been talking, and we're worried about your future financial security." Michael nodded seriously. "You're 68 now, and healthcare costs keep rising. Your house is getting old, probably needs major repairs. We want to make sure you're prepared for whatever comes." Trevor jumped in with his usual confidence. "Dad, we've researched some excellent senior living communities, modern facilities, healthcare on-site, social activities. Much better than trying to maintain that old house by yourself." Patricia pulled out her phone and showed me pictures. "Look how beautiful this place is. Westfield Senior Living, right here in town. You'd have a nice apartment, meals included, transportation services. No more worrying about home maintenance or cooking for yourself." I studied the pictures on Patricia's phone. Westfield Senior Living was indeed beautiful, I should know, since I was one of the investors who'd financed its construction. "It looks expensive," I said carefully. "That's the thing," Trevor said, leaning forward excitedly. "We've crunched the numbers. If you sell your house, the proceeds should cover most of the entry fee. We can help with monthly costs if needed. Between the three of us, we can make sure you're comfortable." Michael, bless his heart, looked uncomfortable with the financial discussion. "Dad, we just want what's best for you. That house is too big, too much work. Wouldn't it be nice to have everything taken care of?" I looked at my three children, so earnest in their desire to manage my life. They genuinely believed they were helping their aging father make responsible decisions. In their minds, I was a financially vulnerable senior who needed their guidance and support. "Have you researched the costs?" I asked. Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Entry fee is $350,000, plus about $4,000 monthly. With your house value and pension, it should work perfectly." They had no idea my house was worth far more than they calculated, or that my actual monthly income was several times my pension amount. They were trying to solve a problem that didn't exist, using resources they didn't understand. "I appreciate your concern," I said slowly. "Let me think about it." Trevor smiled, clearly feeling successful. "Dad, I know change is scary at your age, but this is really the smart financial move. You'll have professional care, no property maintenance worries, and we'll know you're safe. At your age." The phrase echoed in my head as I drove home that night. My children saw me as an elderly man whose best years were behind him, someone who needed their protection and guidance because he couldn't navigate the modern world. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next morning, I called Tom McKenna and arranged to meet for coffee at Giuseppe's. Tom and I had been meeting monthly for 15 years, reviewing our various real estate investments and discussing new opportunities. "I need to have a conversation with my children," I told Tom over our usual corner table. "They're trying to plan my financial future without understanding my actual situation." Tom chuckled. He'd met my kids at various family events over the years and had always been amused by their dismissive attitude toward their father's old-fashioned business relationships. "How do you want to handle it?" he asked. "I think it's time for complete transparency. They need to understand what my outdated methods have actually accomplished." Tom nodded. "Want me to prepare a summary of our joint investments, property values, income streams, projected returns?" "That would be helpful. I want specific numbers for everything real estate, business investments, the works." Giuseppe Jr. stopped by our table as he did every month when Tom and I met. "How are the families, gentlemen?" "Walter's about to give his children some financial education," Tom said with a grin. Giuseppe laughed. "About time. Patricia was in here last week complaining about house prices. If she only knew her father owns half the commercial real estate she drives past every day. That afternoon, I called my accountant, Margaret Valdez, and asked her to prepare a comprehensive portfolio statement. Margaret had been managing my taxes and investment records for 12 years. She understood exactly what I needed. Should I include the projected valuations for the undeveloped properties? She asked. Include everything. Current market values, annual income, growth projections. I want my children to see the complete picture. This should be interesting, Margaret said dryly. She'd met Trevor during a tax appointment and had been unimpressed with his assumption that his father needed basic financial guidance. Over the next week, I gathered documentation for 45 years of strategic investments, property deeds, partnership agreements, loan documents, tax returns, bank statements, and financial projections. The stack of paperwork was 6 inches thick. I also made some phone calls. Carl Hudson, whose recycling business I'd helped launch in 1992, was now CEO of Hudson Environmental Services, a regional company with 47 employees and annual revenues approaching $12 million. Carl and I had remained close friends and business partners through 3 decades of growth and expansion. "Carl, I need a favor," I said when he answered his personal line. "My children think I'm a financially naive old man who needs their protection. I'd like to invite them to tour your facility and learn about our business relationship." Carl laughed loudly. "Walter, without your initial investment and ongoing advice, this company wouldn't exist. I'd be happy to explain that to your kids." I made similar calls to business partners, property managers, and other people in my investment network. By the end of the week, I had arranged what I privately called my financial education tour. Sunday dinner at my house had been a family tradition for 15 years, ever since Margaret passed. My children came every week, usually bringing news about their struggles with mortgages, job stress, and financial planning. They always offered advice about my life and finances, assuming I needed their guidance. This Sunday would be different. I set the table for 4 and prepared Margaret's famous pot roast recipe I'd learned to cook after she died, though I'd never mentioned that to my children. They assumed I survived on frozen dinners and takeout from outdated restaurants like Giuseppe's. When they arrived, the conversation followed its usual pattern. Patricia complained about losing another bidding war on a house. Michael worried about his restaurant's declining profits. Trevor discussed his latest consulting projects and explained how modern business strategies could solve everyone's problems. "Dad, have you given more thought to the senior living community?" Patricia asked as I served dessert. "I called them yesterday, and they have an opening coming up in August. We should schedule a tour." "Actually," I said, setting down the coffee pot and settling into my chair, "I think it's time we had a different conversation." I pulled out the manila folder I'd prepared and placed it on the table. "What's that?" Trevor asked. "Financial records," I said simply. "Since you're all concerned about my financial security, I thought you should see the actual numbers." I opened the folder and handed Patricia the first document, a current bank statement showing balances in 3 different accounts totaling $847,000. Patricia stared at the numbers, her face confused. "Dad, this can't be right. These are checking and savings accounts, current operating funds," I confirmed, "for monthly expenses and short-term investments." Trevor grabbed the statement and studied it carefully. "Dad, where did this money come from? Your pension and Social Security couldn't possibly." I handed him the next document, Margaret Valdez's comprehensive portfolio summary. Trevor's face went white as he read. Michael leaned over his shoulder, and Patricia grabbed her own copy from the folder. "Current real estate holdings," I said calmly. "Estimated market value, $3.2 million. Annual rental and partnership income, $284,000. The room was completely silent except for the sound of pages turning. "Business investments and private partnerships," I continued. "Current estimated value, $1.8 million. Average annual return, $156,000. Patricia looked up from the papers, her face stunned. "Dad, this says you own part of Hudson Environmental Services and McKenna Development and Giuseppe's Restaurant." "Giuseppe's has been one of my most reliable investments," I said. "Consistent profits, steady growth, excellent management. That outdated business Model you dismissed generates about $18,000 annually in loan payments. Trevor was flipping through pages frantically. Dad, according to this, your total net worth is over $5 million. Conservative estimate, I confirmed. Margaret thinks it's closer to $6 million, but I prefer to be cautious with projections. Michael, who had been silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke. Dad, how is this possible? You worked as an engineer. You never talked about having this kind of money. I built relationships, I said simply. Those handshake deals and old-fashioned loyalty you dismissed, they've been the foundation of strategic investments for 45 years. I pulled out another document, Tom McKenna's development summary, Westfield Meadows, where Patricia has been trying to buy a house. I'm a limited partner in that development. I helped finance the construction 12 years ago. Current investment value, $680,000. Patricia stared at me. You own part of the neighborhood where I'm trying to buy a house. Part owner, I corrected. And if you'd like to purchase in Westfield Meadows, I can arrange favorable financing terms. Trevor was still studying the portfolio summary, his MBA training helping him understand the numbers but not the strategy behind them. Dad, these are private market investments. Pre-IPO companies, development partnerships, direct real estate ownership. How did you even find these opportunities? The same way I found everything else, I said. Relationships. Frank Morrison introduced me to Tom McKenna in 1984. Tom introduced me to Carl Hudson. Carl introduced me to other manufacturers and logistics companies. Giuseppe S.R. connected me with other restaurant owners and food service businesses. I gestured toward the stack of documents. Every investment you see there came through personal relationships with people I trusted. No online platforms, no investment apps, no digital disruption. Just coffee meetings, handshake agreements, and 45 years of keeping my word. Patricia was crying not sad tears, but the overwhelmed tears of someone whose entire worldview had just shifted. Dad, we thought. We thought you were struggling financially. We were trying to help. I know, I said gently. You saw an old man who wrote checks and didn't use online banking, and you assumed I was financially vulnerable. But those old-fashioned methods weren't signs of confusion, they were conscious choices based on experience. Michael looked at the restaurant partnership documents. Dad, when I complained about my restaurant struggling, why didn't you tell me about your experience in the food service industry? Would you have listened? I asked. Every time I offered advice, you explained that the restaurant business had changed since my day. You weren't interested in outdated opinions. Trevor set down the portfolio summary and looked directly at me. Dad, I owe you an apology. We all do. We treated you like you didn't understand modern business, but you've built something incredible. You weren't wrong about modern business, I said. Technology has changed everything, and your generation has skills I'll never have. But relationships, trust, and patience, those fundamentals haven't changed. I pulled out one final document, a letter I'd prepared the night before. This is for all three of you. Partnership agreements in a family investment fund I'm establishing. Equal shares, equal voting rights, equal distributions. I want to teach you what Frank Morrison taught me 45 years ago, how to build wealth through relationships and strategic thinking. Patricia wiped her eyes and smiled. Dad, does this mean you're not moving to Westfield Senior Living? I laughed. Patricia, I'm one of the investors who financed Westfield Senior Living. If I wanted to live there, I wouldn't need to sell my house to afford it. Trevor was studying the partnership agreement. Dad, this fund. The initial capitalization is $500,000, seed money, I confirmed. I want each of you to learn how to identify opportunities, build relationships, and make strategic investments. Trevor, your analytical skills and business education will be valuable. Patricia, your marketing background will help us evaluate consumer-focused opportunities. Michael, your restaurant experience gives you insights into service industries. But what about your retirement? Michael asked. Shouldn't you be enjoying this money instead of working with us? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd raised my children and built my life. Michael, I'm 68 years old, and I've spent 45 years building something meaningful. The money isn't the point, it's the relationships, the trust, the satisfaction of helping good people build successful businesses. I turned back to face my children. You thought I needed your protection, but what I really need is your partnership. I want to teach you everything I've learned, and I want to learn from you too. Trevor stood up and walked over to me. Dad, I'm sorry for calling your methods outdated. I was arrogant and wrong. You weren't entirely wrong, I said. Some of my methods are outdated, but some of your methods are incomplete. Together, we can combine old-school relationship building with modern analytical tools and technology. Patricia joined us at the window. So this family investment fund, we'd be working together. If you want to, I said. I have opportunities lined up that could benefit from your skills. Carl Hudson wants to expand into renewable energy consulting. That's a field where Trevor's business analysis and Patricia's marketing expertise would be valuable. Tom McKenna is considering residential development projects where Michael's understanding of customer service could make a difference. The next few hours were unlike any family conversation we'd ever had. Instead of my children lecturing me about modern business, we talked as equals about investment strategies, market opportunities, and business relationships. Trevor used his laptop to research the companies I'd invested in, impressed by their growth and profitability. Patricia asked detailed questions about marketing strategies and customer development. Michael wanted to understand how restaurant partnerships could extend into other service industries. By the time they left that evening, we'd scheduled meetings with Tom McKenna, Carl Hudson, and Giuseppe Jr. I wanted my children to meet the people behind the investments, to understand how relationship-based business actually works. The following week, we toured Carl's environmental services facility. Trevor was impressed by the sophisticated recycling technologies and data management systems. Patricia immediately saw marketing opportunities for Carl's consulting services. Michael recognized parallels between Carl's customer service approach and successful restaurant management. Your father's investment made all of this possible, Carl explained as we finished the tour. But more than the money, his advice and connections have been invaluable. Walter understands that business success comes from solving real problems for real people. Trevor nodded thoughtfully. I can see opportunities to help you expand into corporate sustainability consulting. There's a huge market for environmental compliance services. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear, Carl said. Walter told me you have the analytical skills to help us develop new service lines. Our next stop was Tom McKenna's office, where he showed us plans for 3 upcoming development projects. Patricia, your father mentioned you have marketing experience, Tom said. I've been struggling with how to position these developments in a competitive market. What do you think? Patricia studied the plans and demographic data. These are all targeting young families, but you're competing on price. What if we focused on community features and long-term value instead? Tom smiled. That's exactly the kind of thinking I need. Walter, your daughter understands market positioning. Michael spent time at Giuseppe's, learning how the restaurant had grown from a small family business into a local institution. Giuseppe Jr. explained how my initial loan had allowed them to expand their kitchen and add catering services. Your father saw potential that banks missed, Giuseppe said. He understood that customer loyalty and consistent quality create sustainable profits. That's what I've been trying to achieve with my restaurant, Michael said. Building relationships with customers instead of chasing trends. Exactly. Your father taught me that success in the restaurant business isn't about following every food trend, it's about doing a few things exceptionally well and treating customers like family. Over the next month, my children's entire perspective shifted. They stopped seeing me as an aging father who needed protection and started viewing me as a business partner with valuable experience and resources. Trevor applied his analytical skills to evaluate potential investments, but now he understood the importance of meeting business owners personally and building long-term relationships. His MBA training became more valuable when combined with relationship-based deal sourcing. Tricia developed marketing strategies for several of our portfolio companies, helping them expand their customer base while maintaining their core values. Her modern marketing skills enhanced the traditional relationship-building approach that had made these businesses successful. Michael implemented customer service improvements at his restaurant based on lessons learned from Giuseppe's and other successful service businesses in our network. Within 2 months, his profits had increased by 30%. The family investment fund became our monthly meeting point. We gather at my house every first Sunday, review our portfolio performance, discuss new opportunities, and plan strategic initiatives. It was like those old family dinners, but instead of my children lecturing me about modern business, we collaborated as equal partners. 6 months later, Patricia and her husband purchased their dream house in Westfield Meadows with favorable financing terms arranged through Tom McKenna's development company. Trevor had been promoted at his consulting firm after successfully landing 2 new clients from our business network. Michael's restaurant had become profitable and was considering a second location. But the real transformation was in how we related to each other. During our December family meeting, Trevor presented an analysis of renewable energy investment opportunities. His research was thorough and sophisticated, incorporating both financial modeling and relationship-building strategies. "Dad, I found 3 companies that match our criteria," he said. "Strong management teams, sustainable business models, and opportunities for strategic partnerships with our existing portfolio companies." Patricia had developed marketing plans for each potential investment, showing how our network could help these companies grow their customer base. Michael had identified operational synergies between the renewable energy companies and our existing businesses, particularly opportunities for cross-referencing and shared services. I listened to their presentations with pride and amazement. These were the same children who, 18 months earlier, had dismissed my business approach as hopelessly outdated. Now they were combining their modern skills with relationship-based investing to identify opportunities I never would have found on my own. "This is excellent work," I told them. "But before we make any investments, I want you to meet the business owners. Take them to dinner, visit their facilities, understand their challenges and goals. The numbers matter, but the people behind the numbers matter more." Trevor nodded. "I've already scheduled meetings with all 3 CEOs. I want to understand their leadership styles and company cultures before we commit any capital." Good thinking. And remember, we're not just investors, we're partners. These business relationships should benefit everyone involved, not just provide financial returns. As 2024 began, our family investment fund had grown to over $800,000 in committed capital and was generating annual returns that exceeded most professional investment portfolios. But more importantly, my children had learned to combine their modern business skills with time-tested principles of relationship building and strategic thinking. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Trevor's generation did understand digital disruption, artificial intelligence, and global markets, knowledge that enhanced our investment capabilities. But they had initially dismissed the relationship building and patience that made those modern tools truly effective. Meanwhile, my generation understood trust, loyalty, and long-term thinking values that remained essential even in rapidly changing industries. But I had underestimated how much my children's modern skills could enhance traditional business approaches. The real breakthrough came when we learned to respect and combine both perspectives. In March 2024, we made our most successful investment yet. Patricia had identified a small technology company that provided software solutions for traditional manufacturing businesses. Trevor's analysis showed strong growth potential and sustainable competitive advantages. Michael recognized operational challenges similar to those he'd solved in the restaurant industry. But instead of just investing money, we introduced the company's CEO to Carl Hudson, whose environmental services business needed exactly the kind of manufacturing optimization software they provided. We connected them with Tom McKenna, whose construction projects could benefit from their project management tools. We arranged meetings with other business owners in our network who had similar needs. Within 6 months, the software company had tripled their customer base and was expanding into 3 new market segments. Our investment had grown by 180%, but more importantly, we'd helped a good company solve real problems for businesses we cared about. "This is what Frank Morrison taught me 40 years ago," I told my children during our monthly meeting. "The best investments aren't just about making money, they're about creating value for people you trust." Trevor smiled. "Dad, You were right about relationship-based investing. But you were also right that we could enhance your approach with modern analytical tools and marketing strategies. It's not my approach anymore, I said. It's our approach. You've taught me as much as I've taught you. By summer 2024, our family had become something I'd never imagined possible. Instead of adult children who thought their aging father needed protection, I had genuine business partners who valued my experience while contributing skills I didn't possess. We still had Sunday dinners, but now they were strategy sessions. We discussed market trends, evaluated investment opportunities, and planned business development activities. My children asked for my advice, but they also challenged my assumptions and suggested improvements to my methods. The respect went both directions. When Patricia struggled with work-life balance as her marketing career advanced, I shared lessons learned from 40 years of managing professional and family responsibilities. When Trevor considered leaving his consulting firm to start his own practice, I connected him with successful entrepreneurs who could provide practical advice. When Michael planned his restaurant expansion, our entire business network rallied to help him find the right location, negotiate favorable lease terms, and develop supplier relationships. In September 2024, exactly 1 year after our first family investment meeting, we celebrated reaching $1.2 million in fund assets and achieving a 28% annual return. But the real celebration was the transformation in our family relationships. Dad, do you ever regret not telling us about your investments earlier? Patricia asked as we reviewed our portfolio performance. I thought carefully before answering. I regret that it took so long for us to respect each other's strengths. You needed to learn that experience and relationships have value. I needed to learn that modern tools and analytical methods could enhance traditional approaches. Trevor raised his coffee cup in a toast to combining old-school wisdom with new-school innovation. To family partnerships, Michael added. To proving that every generation has something valuable to teach, Patricia concluded. As I looked around the table at my 3 children, now my 3 business partners, I realized that the greatest return on any investment isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in relationships, respect, and the satisfaction of building something meaningful together. My children had once dismissed me as an outdated old man whose time had passed. I had once dismissed them as naive young adults who didn't understand how the real world worked. We were both wrong. The modern economy does require digital fluency, analytical sophistication, and adaptive thinking, but it still runs on trust, relationships, and patience. Success comes from combining timeless principles with contemporary tools. Most importantly, I learned that wisdom isn't about age, it's about respecting different perspectives and learning from everyone you meet. Today, at 69, I'm busier than I was during my full-time engineering career. Our family investment fund has grown to over $2 million in assets we're partners in 12 different businesses, and we're actively evaluating opportunities in renewable energy, healthcare technology, and sustainable manufacturing. But the best part of my day is still our weekly family meetings, where my old-fashioned business experience combines with my children's modern skills to identify opportunities that neither generation could have found alone. Trevor was right about one thing: his generation does face challenges my generation never experienced. Digital disruption, global competition, and rapid technological change require skills I'll never fully master. But I was right about something too: success still comes from treating people with respect, keeping your word, and building relationships that last longer than market cycles. The secret isn't choosing between old methods and new methods. The secret is learning when to use each approach and how to combine them effectively. My children thought I was an outdated relic who couldn't understand their modern world. Instead, they discovered I was a bridge between traditional wisdom and contemporary opportunity. And they taught me that the best investments aren't just financial, they're the relationships you build with people you trust, respect, and love. That's a lesson worth more than any $1,000,000 secret. If you enjoyed Walter's story about proving his worth to his family, please like this video and subscribe to Revenge with Peter. Comment below and tell me about a time when someone underestimated your abilities. Have you ever had to prove your value to family members who didn't understand your strengths? Next week, I'll share another story from my grandfather's collection, this one about a 73-year-old widow who shocked her stepchildren when they discovered what she'd been doing with their late father's worthless property collection. Until then, remember that wisdom comes in many forms, and the best partnerships are built on mutual respect across generations.